Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us. So, perhaps for the first time, a lot of people will say this is one of those first time that they will see the INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, and he's had a meeting. At that meeting, he was talking about the 2023 election, the role INEC played, and what they will be doing. Let me allow you first and foremost to listen to the review or the assessment of INEC as an institution on the election. Take a listen to the INEC chairman.
Despite the divergent opinions about the outcome of the election, the overall outlook suggests that it is fair reflection of a complex multi-party democracy. Our record shows that these elections have produced the most diverse outcomes ever produced since 1999. Today, 5 political parties produce state governors. 7 parties won senatorial seats. 8 are represented in the House of Representatives and 9 in the state houses of assembly. Clearly, the 10th National Assembly is certainly the most diverse in party representation since 1999. We must acknowledge that there were some challenges which were structural, infrastructural, and human in nature. We are presently looking at all the evidence of infractions during the election, including the prosecution of electoral offenders.
Yeah, the latter part of what is said about prosecution of electoral offenders gets our attention, and allow you to also listen to him again on what they will be doing specifically about that.
We are looking at the activities of all actors involved in the election, including some of our high-ranking officials. I can confirm that the Nigeria Police concluded its investigation of the conduct of our resident electoral commissioner in Adamawa State and submitted the case file to us. Appropriate action will be taken in a matter of days, and Nigerians will be fully informed. I can also confirm that we have received 215 case files from the Nigeria Police following their arrest and the conclusion of investigation into electoral offenses arising from the 2023 general election. We are working with the Nigerian Bar Association, the NBA, to prosecute the alleged offenders.
INEC Chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu. Let's get some insight into all of this. I'm being joined by one man that will probably be at that seat if he were still in INEC, Dr. Mustapha Lekki. He was a former national commissioner with INEC. Thank you so much indeed for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Sharon, for having me. Glad to be here.
How difficult is this kind of period? This is perhaps the first time we're seeing INEC chairman come out publicly to speak to Nigerians about the election. And this is his own assessment, or the commission's assessment. There's a EU assessment, and those who are talking, the government of the day had denied and disowned what the EU had said. But how difficult is it coming out several months after the election?
Well, first and foremost, we should commend the chairman for speaking so forcefully and so clearly. I would say for the first time, since the election. Clearly, this is kind of statement, presentation that a lot of Nigerians would have expected, given the challenges that occurred during the election. Some of those statements would have been made promptly as those challenges were made. And of course, because waiting very long to make comments about that would have been playing into the hands of the court, and then it would have been used against INEC. So I commend him for this statement that I just made, today. On the issue of electoral offenses, it has been a turning issue for INEC, for the electoral system in Nigeria. People have been calling since the time of the Justice Uwais report that we set up an independent commission, to take into account this issue of electoral offenses. So
do we really need that?
Well,
because there are those who will say INEC is there. The police, which has somewhat kind of omnibus role to prosecute any kind of offense.
The reason why people think we need, because INEC is saddled with too many things for which it doesn't have the competency to do.
And there are those who will criticize that even the ones that INEC promised failed in it.
Well, I mean, I will not align with such people who will say that. And you have to look at things very critically. I know people who are playing to the social media space will say all manners of things. When it talks about the failure of INEC, we must look at it within what the law allows INEC to do and not to do. So you must tell me, and I believe that clearly INEC, there are issues out there, you know, the issues of reputational damage, which has occurred to INEC clearly. Is
How bad do you think this reputational damage
I think it's pretty bad. And the reason is mostly because it's being fanned by the social media, really.
Is it?
Yeah,
but
because
based on
perception
what was also said, because, I mean, there are those who say INEC should be held accountable, not for what they did not promise, but what they promised. What they said they were going to do and what they failed to do.
I think they are a bit unfair, but again, you know, we're looking at perception. I mean, they are a bit unfair in the sense that you have to hold INEC accountable for what the law permits INEC to do. Did INEC break any law, really? What is the Electoral Act of 2022 that says INEC must do this and INEC failed to do that? So we must start from there, because INEC must comply with what the law asks us to do. But it could have been the exuberance of the leadership of INEC to have made promises beyond its capacity. Clearly, it's suffering the damage to its reputation by such outlandish promise. You know, clearly, I think that...
You think those promises were outlandish?
I think they were outlandish because they're not in the law. Nobody asks INEC to go there that you must do this in live and submit it as it is happening. It is not in the law. So for you to make that promise and go outside the shore of Nigeria to make such promises, I mean, you are putting yourself up for a lot of, you know, risk. And you can see the outcome of that. So people are happy now that as if that was a requirement for declaration of results. It was not a requirement, clearly. No.
But was the election a good election?
Well, if you ask me, I mean, I have to look at it in terms of elections that have happened in the country historically. When you look at it historically, honestly, what happened in this election are a bit mind-boggling on the positive side, in the sense that there were many things that happened that couldn't happen in the past. People you expect will just win easily because they are the incumbent, they lost. I mean, so many people, ordinarily, there is a free ticket to go from being a governor to go to the Senate in Nigeria. It's not a free ticket. You don't even have to contest. But you see many of them who contested. At least half a dozen of them considered they lost. I mean, that is a serious thing. And then you see a number of parties. Multi-party election took place, and many multi-parties won, and they are in the State House Assembly, they are in the National Assembly, they are in the Senate.
Is that a reflection of...
It's a reflection of a good election. It's a reflection of a good outcome. You know, doesn't mean that there were no challenges which are very contentious, which have affected, damaged the reputation of INEC clearly, and they have to dig themselves out of this hole. And I think the leadership has a responsibility to bear as far as that is concerned. But in terms of concrete, measurable outcome, these are indices that have never happened in the electoral space in Nigeria. And we must accept it and grab it as a way to move forward.
There are those, I mean, for some of us who have followed and monitored activities of election observers, and the EU came and became a sensational one. Some of us would describe it as sensational because EU's report is perhaps a replica or a copy of what a lot of the local observers have actually observed. In fact, there are those local observers or Nigerian observers that have done more intense work than what the EU had done, and they've done it several weeks since after the elections. But if you look at the EU report, I don't know if you've read it or if you've studied it, do you think it was a report that INEC should be considering?
Well, there are many ways to look at the EU report. Yeah, of course, INEC must consider all reports, and all reports must know that they will have their biases. They're coming from a particular standpoint, whether it is EU, whether it is the African Union, which have their own. You must compare that too, because those are our own people. I don't want to say that EU is irrelevant, but those are closer home than the EU are. But the EU must also look at their report vis-a-vis what happens in their own countries, in their own politics, in their own parties, in their own elections in their country. You know, so you cannot use a different standard. And some of the things that EU, I've read the report, they measure, like issue of violence. You can't hold INEC accountable for. You cannot hold INEC responsible for marginal representation. Women are not participating. I mean, I don't understand. So some of all these things are just heuristic kind of claims by EU. I mean, those are standard in their own country.
But as a people, should we be bothered about EU anyways, or their own report? I'll probably focus on something, some other reports.
No, we should bother about all reports. We should take them and try to sift out things that are relevant and throw away the nonsense that may be contained in those reports. That's the way I would look at it. Everything is not that bad, but a few good things that will be there. The issue of youth participation, the issue of gender representation, they're very good issues. We must find a way to make them part of our electoral law so that they make sure that everybody is covered, no particular group is marginalized. So in that sense, pushing that envelope is a good thing. But doesn't mean that they should come here, I don't want to sound as if I'm against EU, really, but really they must look at things they prefer to visit what happens in their own country.
Within the cultural milieu of our space.
Of our space.
Yeah. I mean, without sounding condescending at all, I mean, there are those who are anti any colonialist tendency, any Western or European culture trying to breathe down on whatever practices, I mean, that we have here in the country, and look as though we've been here for 200 years practicing this democracy. Yeah. And that, look, like the popular saying, let the poor breathe. Let Nigeria breathe for a moment, in the sense that this is young, but again, we also need to internalize and look within ourselves to say, where did we get it wrong and how can we get it better? First and foremost, as Nigerians, we need to hold INEC also accountable, because it's our own. Yes. And we have paid so much to make sure that INEC is where it is today. And perhaps the reason why some people are so agitated about what INEC said and what they did not do. Yeah. For you, with the benefit of hindsight, what is that one thing that INEC did that you think, with the benefit of hindsight, now looking at it from, you know, what has happened, what do you think is one thing that INEC did that you think maybe they shouldn't have done it?
Well, one thing they shouldn't have done, and I put this squarely on the leadership, is to make promise that was unwarranted. It's more like bravado promise. I mean, in a political situation like this, where there are a lot of uncertainty and, you know, minds all around the field, you don't make such promises. I think the INEC leadership overpromised what was not required for it to promise. To say that elections, I mean, results will be transmitted live, so you can go there and see it as it is being transmitted. That was not.
It was for transparency.
I mean, for whatever reason it was, but the point is that you have to look at our own environment.
They tried it out in Osun. They tried it out in
people were not interested, but this is national election now. This is where everything comes together. They tried those things in the U.S. You saw what happened. They were hacking the U.S. So how many people do you have in INEC? I worked in INEC. I know the ICT guys, good ladies that I work there. They're not as resilient to be able to rise up to the challenge of if their system is being hacked. I'm not making that this is what happened, because INEC has not told us what happened, even though they need to tell us, but they cannot say it now because everything is in court, because to be held against them. But the staff there don't have that kind of skill, competencies and technology to be able to respond to any manner of disruption technologically. Just few guys that are there. So talk about advanced countries like the US, they were struggling. And then you talk about Nigeria. How are they going to rise to it? So the issue of overpromising damaged the reputation of INEC. That should not have happened. I should just stick to what the law says INEC should do, and stick to make sure they do that. And the law is very clear. You don't declare with IRA, you don't declare with beavers. It is still a manual process of collation, following the collation procedure from polling units to the ward, to the LGA, to the state, and then to the national level. That is what the law says, and INEC has complied completely with that process.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you again imagine that the duty of INEC, and they say he who come to equity must come with clean hands.
Yes.
So INEC wants to conduct an election and says, look, we are going to make it transparent. There's nothing to hide, and all of that. And there are those who are already saying that maybe we need to tinker with our laws, electoral law 2022, and start looking into some areas that failed that politicians
what is the measure of transparency? What are the indicators of transparency? I mean, elections are conducted at every polling unit. And every polling unit, INEC make provision for every stakeholder to have a representation at every polling, over 170,000 polling units across the country. So every party has a representative there, a polling agent. And they saw the votes being counted, they were counted, and they were all given copies of the result. What can be more transparent than that? You have a copy you take home to your party to show this is what happened at the polling unit where you were assigned to. Can it be any more transparent than that? So the fact that they went on this tangent, the chairman of the leadership went on this tangent about over-promising that they are going to deliver this as it is happening live in a country like ours with all these...
So you imagine that IREF is not stipulated in the law. That's what you say.
Yeah, clearly. That is my understanding. It is not there.
But Beavers is captured.
Yeah, but it's a technology cover. But
the law actually said, the Constitution says INEC should conduct the election and make any guideline as it deems. The electoral law also almost repeated what the Constitution says, gives INEC the power. Anything that INEC then do or say or put together becomes binding. So if they say they want to capture the election by and put the result out through the IRF is binding, because that is how the Constitution says it is whatever they deem fit.
Yeah, the Constitution, the collation process is very outlined. Formats, one stage to the other, the provision of agent, those are in the Electoral Act. They are there. And that
from EC8, from EC9,
all those
EC8A, and all those things are clearly stated.
Those steps are clearly stated.
And so those are the things we should hold on.
That is transparent. And INEC has ensured, I'm not here to defend, I'm not working for INEC, but INEC has ensured that parties have the opportunity to bring their agent to witness what happened and to obtain copies of those results at each level. So you obtain your copies. If the copies are different, the matters will be arising.
With your experience in INEC, on a final note, and this is where we anchor, sir, with your experience in INEC and what has happened, I mean, you were there, you've conducted several elections, one of the most controversial elections you've coordinated. I remember how tense things were on the field some years ago, and we thought that there was a point of no return, but thank God that things were resolved at that time. But if there is something that needs to be done urgently to really make things better, after all said and done, what would that be?
Well, it will be difficult for me to pinpoint a particular thing, and I think this is going to come out from the review that INEC is going to do. And I'm just hoping that this review this time will go beyond the routine, review, because the review now is mostly internal, in which we are looking at both the reports writing as well as the people to be consulted, the key stakeholders.
And the chairman is also saying that there are a lot of people that have been identified, INEC staff and all that have breached the process.
Yes, that is going to be part of it. It will come out in the review. It will also be reflected in the report that will be written. But I expect that we'll go beyond the normal review and actually have independent, using the Electoral Institute of INEC, which can bring in independent researchers from the university to do a thorough post-mortem. That would be a step beyond what we have right now.
INEC is saying NBA is going to help them also in all of these, and we're hoping that anyone who has done any wrong in this election should be brought to book, and justice should prevail.
Hopefully that will happen. And
not only to those who feel that something wrong was done, to the society and to INEC also. Justice should be
INEC already has a pretty good track record while we were there of punishing staff who have breached the law. So more than any other particular commission before us. So I think they will just continue to extend that practice of punishing everybody that has erred in this process.
Thank you so much. I thought we did some justice to the conversation. Thank you so much indeed, Dr. Mustapha Lekki. Always a pleasure. The quality of your mind and your thought. Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Sheon. Thank you very much. Indeed.